stunningly beautiful presentation. I bet you wonder just what it is. Just what could it possibly be? Well, I will not keep you in suspense any longer. Let's welcome Julie.
Go blue. Go blue. Right. Thanks, Trace. Hello, everybody. Julie Nemeth. I'm honored to be the UMAC marketing chair, along with my fellow marketing committee members in the room and virtually. Hello, out there in the virtual world. They're all making this announcement with me. As I've been the marketing chair for about 3 years now, and our group of women were sitting around the table. Well, actually, we were sitting around the Zoom call and started to contemplate the fact that we've heard over and over again for so many decades about the Michigan man, correct? Well, you know what? There is a Michigan woman too, right?
Yes.
Would you agree?
Yes.
Who has a lot of these powerful, amazing characteristics, and we didn't want her left in the dust, right? So what has happened is we decided that we would put together a graphic that would epitomize what the Michigan woman looks like. And we're going to unveil her today, and then I'll talk about her. So Linda, do you want to help me unveil the new Michigan woman? Hi, there she is. Up here, isn't she beautiful? She represents all of you amazing Michigan women. So we're going to read a little bit about her. The Michigan Woman graphic reflects the diversity of the Michigan woman, her uniqueness, her stellar character, her perspectives, her ethnicity, and her career path. It illustrates how that combined individualism of each of us forms the bedrock and strength of the Michigan woman as a whole. What do you think? Is that us or not? Isn't that phenomenal? I'm so excited. This is what I call her, she, her. This is what I call her. And just so you're aware, the graphic was designed actually with the thoughts of the lobby sculpture back here. I'm so glad we're here today to announce this. This is the sculpture that was donated by UMAC in 1984. It was designed and created by Pamela Stump, our own alumni from 50 and 51. And we purchased this sculpture and donated it to the Alumni Association. So it sits not here now in the renovated lobby or in the renovated building. And as Betty Bishop said we have a press release that's going out Monday morning to Michigan media and some larger markets to announce her. But as Betty Bishop says in the press release, we hope that our campus leadership and alumni will begin elevating the Michigan woman and all she embodies on our 3 campuses, in the workplace, in sports, amongst her family, through engagement in civic and faith organizations, and how she represents our stellar University of Michigan throughout the globe. There is no one quite like the Michigan woman. So the great news is that we will be, I mentioned we'll be posting and announcing her on social media on Monday morning. We'll be pushing it out through to traditional media. She'll be on our website. She'll be on our membership registration page. We have new business cards for everybody to take. These will be at the registration desk, but it's a QR code. If you can take some of these business cards in your travels, in your social circles, and if you run into a Michigan woman, have them scan the QR code and get their free membership to the Alumni Council. Okay, so take those with you. The Michigan woman is on the back of it. Okay. We also have a new brochure that has the Michigan woman in it. It has a picture of the statue and talks about how we came up with the Michigan woman based on Pamela Stump's sculpture. And we have new luggage tags with our new logo and the new Michigan woman to take with you today. So please take those. And the most exciting news that I have today is that we actually are launching our first UMAC store that is featuring attire with not only the UMAC logo, but the Michigan woman on it. So that'll be launching, it's live now. Isn't it exciting? And the great thing is that this will not only create awareness of not only Alumni Association, the ability to join the Alumni Council, but it's also going to be a visual for you to get out there to wear, to talk about the Michigan Woman and drive membership. And then UMAC also, it is a fundraiser for UMAC. We get a small percentage of each purchase that will go back into our operating funds. So we're just so excited. So we will push that out, okay? And we'll push that out in social media pages. We'll probably send an e-blast on Monday as well, getting that link out to everybody. The store will be open until June 30th. At that point, all the materials will be printed and they'll be delivered to your home by middle of July. And then we will open another store after that for tailgating needs. So you'll see the Michigan Woman on things for your tailgating for the fall. So expect that store afterwards. So that's our big reveal. Welcome to having an actual visual of who we all are collectively together. You all are beautiful. Just look at the diversity around the table and our uniqueness. And now we get to celebrate that in the Michigan Woman. So thank you very much. And thank you to the marketing committee.
Thank you so much for the big reveal. It is absolutely wonderful. And now we'll hear from Ms. Judah Doty.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. So I wrote a little something, so excuse me for looking down at my phone, but I wanted to make sure that I captured the essence of this moment and also the pride that I have to really embody this new position. And so I am very honored to stand before you today. As was mentioned before, my name is Judah Vashti Doty. I am the new Associate Director of Affiliate Programs. And so it is truly a privilege to join you in this meeting, and I bring warm greetings on behalf of the entire Alumni Association. In my role, I am blessed with the opportunity to collaborate closely with our esteemed alumni affiliates. Together, we strive to maintain a vibrant connection with the University of Michigan. Graduates throughout their lifelong journey, fulfilling the association's vital mission of fostering enduring bonds among alumni and also with our beloved alma mater. I think I don't want to go into all of my responsibilities, but I want to talk about a little bit of them, right? So my responsibilities include offering guidance and support for expansion, fostering campus partnerships, and identifying avenues for affiliate groups to engage with our diverse alumni community. And I think UMAC does a wonderful job of doing that. So we hope to expand that a little bit more. Our alumni volunteers are really the heartbeat of the organization. So you all curate enriching programs and experiences that unite all Wolverines under the banner of our shared Michigan spirit. I must really express heartfelt gratitude to the Alumni Council, whose unwavering support has been instrumental in our efforts to reach and engage alumni across the globe. So from forging collaborations with units across all 3 campuses, to spearheading fundraising initiatives for student scholarships and championing the remarkable achievements of Michigan women, your partnership has been invaluable. We eagerly anticipate further collaborations as we together expand our membership and advance our shared goals in the years ahead. And I've been learning so much throughout my onboarding, and the one thing that has consistently come up is just the great work that you all do in terms of scholarships and fundraising and really bringing people into the institution. And so we really want to keep that going. With the Alumni Association this year, and last year I would say, has been presented with some challenges and some transformations. Yet, amidst those challenges, our organization is blessed to be guided by the visionary leadership of our new CEO, Ayanna McConnell. So with over 2 decades of experience in student and alumni relations, Ayanna is renewed across campus for her collaborative spirit and her pioneering work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Her stewardship of the Alumni Association Board really endorsed just our strategic plan for 2024. And now we're going to march forward with determination as we prepare for the opportunities that lie ahead for 2025, so the fiscal year. I just think in closing, while I may be new to the Alumni Association in terms of work, right? I'm not new to Michigan. I graduated from Michigan in December in the higher ed program with my master's degree in higher education. And so I am no stranger to the ethos of triumph and just the spirit of the Michigan woman. It is an honor to stand amongst such distinguished women, and I'm deeply committed to upholding the legacy of excellence that defines our shared Michigan community. So thank you all so much. I really look forward to doing some great work. And I also look forward to learning a little bit more about each and every woman that's in this room. Thank you so much. Go Blue.
There we go. Okay.
There we go. Should I move to the next?
Yes, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you for that wonderful message, Judah.
Hello, friends across the University of Michigan Alumni Association. I'm so grateful for your invitation to join your spring meeting, and even more grateful for all that you do to engage, promote, and empower women across the university. Through you, we are cultivating healthier relationships and building stronger communities. And through you, we're literally changing the landscape of this university. It's so important that we do so. And we have a fantastic opportunity. We recently launched our Campus Vision 2034, which will sharpen our focus and determine where we will go and what we will dare to achieve. That vision includes several areas of focus and impact, including life-changing education, human health and well-being, climate action and sustainability, and civic engagement and democracy. You are already having this impact through your scholarships and awards, the funds you raise to build the Michigan League, and your continued encouragement and empowerment of women students and alumni across our community. So thank you again. And together, let's do even more. Let's grow together in wellness and sustainability. Let's build stronger relationships and cultivate healthier communities. Thank you again, and go Blue.
Dr. David Michener, botanist. As curator, Dr. Michener oversees cultural collections of the University of Michigan Matthaei Botanical Gardens and Nichols Arboretum. Since his arrival in 1990, he's been actively supporting our beloved gardens and our from regional significance to international prominence. This includes several research trips to the Russian Far East, building our sister garden ties with the Central Botanical Gardens, Minsk, overseeing the restoration of the Upjohn Peony Garden, onboarding the Goldstein Bonsai Garden, and much more. The Upjohn Peony Garden is an important research tool as well as a site of an annual floral pilgrimage. Likewise, the Goldstein Bonsai Garden includes critically renowned exemplars across a focused spectrum. Of course, University of Michigan students are engaged in both gardens. David is an active member of the board of directors of the American Peony Society. He's also the Midwest co-lead in the unprecedented $30 million National Science Foundation funded Center for Braiding Indigenous Knowledges and Sciences, based on decades of engagement with the Anishinaabe tribes of Michigan, and reflected in his role as a University of Michigan mentor faculty in public engagement. David's undergraduate botany degree is from the University of North Carolina, 1977, a PhD from Claremont Graduate School in 1982, and 6 years as a postdoctoral fellow at the Arnold Arboretum of Harvard University. In his spare time, he is a passionate gardener and has helped lead garden study tours in Chile, England, France, Holland, Ireland, Japan, New Zealand, and Scotland. And now I present to you botanist Dr. David Michener speaking on Go Bloom, cultivating social transformation and healthier communities through gardens. Welcome, Dr. Michener.
To advance the slides, you just need to.
And help me get that adjusted. Good,
I don't know which for you.
good. Good morning. It's an honor to be here today, and I'd like to start all public engagements with a moment of silence for those who taught us both the knowledge we have and the values that we try to express through the knowledge we acquire in our lives. I hope you're ready for peony season, because peony season is ready for you. And who knew that the University of Michigan holds one of the greatest peony collections outside of Asia? There's a long social history of peonies in North America that cuts across social classes and various economic categorizations of people, all walks of life, always thinking about beauty. Peonies are much more than just flowers. We didn't have many of them in North Carolina at Chapel Hill because it's too hot in the summer and in the winter. So this is definitely a more northern plant. And I've had people ask me, where can they see them in Atlanta? And I've said, online. So we're lucky to have them here. Have you ever heard of tulip mania, where tulips were worth more than their weight in gold? Well, we almost had the same with peony mania earlier in the 20th century. And North America was one of the centers of breeding peonies. And this is just one of several hundred nurseries. This one, I believe, out of Wisconsin, just showing some of the peonies of the period. And we have all but one of the ones depicted. Everybody was into peonies at the time. There was a woman running basically a private sanatorium, mostly for her husband, up in Alma, Michigan, who wrote about her peonies. And this we found in Central Michigan University's archives, a black and white photo of it. That's how peonies were grown by some people. Other people had thousands of peonies. This is Mrs. Ford, as in the wife of the Ford Motor Company, with her roughly 8,000 peonies laid out in the form of a butterfly. And as you walked through it, you had to imagine how the colors were all arranged to make the wings. Neither of those gardens exists anymore. Even the Ruthven building had peonies at one point, and if it weren't for postcards, who would have known? But there they are. We're not putting them back, but in 1922 was the centennial of the founding of what is now the W.E. Upjohn Peony Garden and its Navy. Something that I hope you'll see woven through here is the role of philanthropy, the role of visionary people, and the idea that someone can think differently. There are nearly 800 peony plants in this garden. And when they're in bloom, how many of you have been there in bloom? Yay, that means some of you haven't. Come on in. You want to get there, in my opinion, in the morning hours, before about 10 in the morning, because the fragrances are coming out of the peonies with the morning moisture. And by late afternoon, the odors, the fragrances degrade into odors. Let's just put it that way. And so it's just as pretty, but it doesn't have the allure of early morning. And no matter when you get there, there will be people there just reveling in it. It is soul soothing. Everybody likes peonies. You will see more noses in peonies and more kids running between the peonies than you thought was ever possible. And you know what? Nobody picks them, nobody vandalizes them, and there are no signs. Everyone knows how to behave. But in addition to having this public face, this is actually a kind of research museum. And this is one of the strands to be woven in. This is a picture of the peony garden from just before the Depression, when it had first been planted. We'll go into more of the history of it. Isn't that stunning? Why would the University of Michigan have a peony garden? Because we don't have a horticulture program. We've never had a horticulture program. We're never going to have a horticultural program, yet we have a peony garden. The idea is that these were exemplars of excellence and that people needed to understand, including students as well as members of the community, of what were standards of beauty and whose ideas of beauty was this. And to do that, you needed to have enough. Now, Dr. W.E. Upjohn is the person who founded the Upjohn Pharmaceutical Company of Kalamazoo. There were 5 siblings, and I never remember whether it's 3 boys or 3 girls, but every single one of them received a graduate or a medical degree from the University of Michigan, most of them in pharmacy. We're talking the 1880s to 1890s. Dr. Upjohn had 14 acres of peonies on his own private estate outside of Kalamazoo because he loved them and they bloomed on his birthday. He also, and this I have no way of, would look for any evidence of it, I think he was also very curious of these as pharmaceuticals because peonies were well known as medicinal plants in pre-Christian Europe. There's a whole nother set of them from China and Japan that are still to this day part of Materia Medica. And I think he was also trying to figure out what were they good for. He never did figure that one, but he did appreciate them for beauty. So let's just think about what he was doing. So he didn't like to know just what did you think. He would actually have surveys and he relied on peony societies. And they were point scored, just like Olympic skaters or athletes on a 10-point score. And this one, the Swan in English, or the Cygne, by a French breeder named Lemoyne, is the highest ranking of any of the peonies at 9.9. And if it didn't get at least a 7.0, it wasn't on his 14 acres. And I love the idea that maybe you could come to an event at this business person's or banquet, and maybe be given a card to go out and point score the peonies before you could have your gin and tonics. I mean, this could be interesting. So one of the things that we find when working in botanical gardens is a lot of people, when they think plants, they think flowers. And if the peony's garden's not in bloom, they don't think there are any peonies present. Or if there are no roses in a rose garden, the rose garden doesn't exist. So what is a peony garden? Well, it's one level is this, just what is the flower, on the plant. And in the corners, I always have, what's the name of it? These are from our peony garden. Who bred this? That is, who did the hybridizing and the year they introduced it into commerce. And our collection is, quote, historic. It's pre-1950. And there's a real reason for that we'll get to. For 20 years, I was on Rackham's faculty steering committee for the museum studies certificate in the graduate school here. And so one of the things we're interested in is how do people, as well as the academy, make meaning out of a museum context. And so one of the things that any art object has, or any rare book, is it's also a commodity or a prize or an artifact, which means you can think of it in another intellectual context. Peonies are the same thing. And by the way, some of these plants are exactly where they planted the same plant back in the 1920s. They are extremely low maintenance in that sense. The other thing that they have, as is true of any art collection, a great library, they become some kind of a cultural icon, and a culture expresses values by what it collects and what it doesn't collect. And so we need to be thinking about this in terms of what does this garden represent? So when I came here in 1990, the Arboretum was one thing and the garden was another. And then when they merged, I became magically curator of the peony garden as well. And at that point, I knew as much about peonies as the rest of you. And it's called responsibility commands attention, yes? And it's called we rise to it. And that's part of it all. So one of the things we've done is approached a donor group about, we think this is an important collection, but we don't really understand it. It's just been neglected for almost 40 years, other than one citizen group trying to help. So the first thing we did was we brought in a panel of international experts who know peonies and could tell us were they even properly identified, because there's no color guide to the nearly 5,000 peonies of the world. It's in people's minds, or it's in some reference books. So one of the persons was out of Kansas City, and he's known peonies since he was an undergraduate at University of Missouri, getting a degree in mule husbandry for the US Army. And I didn't make that up. He said, you would be surprised how many mules the US Army had going into World War II. But he has a phenomenal memory. He's still alive, and he walked right up to this one that we didn't know at all. We had as an unknown. And he goes, that's not unknown, that's Sylvia Saunders, and I haven't seen her since the 50s. Just like a high school reunion. And I expected the next line to be, and she hasn't changed a bit, right? We turn out to have one of only about 3 Sylvia Saunders known in the world. And by the way, about half of the peonies in the peony garden are not known anywhere else in the world. Cultivars go extinct. If they're not in the trade or they're not in somebody's garden, they just go away. What's special about it, as you can see kind of in the bottom part better, is all the buds on a stem would bloom at once. And what the breeder was trying to do was breed flowers that were bouquets. And he was so proud of it, he named it for his only daughter, Sylvia. Total bomb on the marketplace in the 1920s, because that wasn't the look. But Dr. Upjohn thought it was an interesting one, and he had picked it up. By the way, the Saunders family later became the designers of the peony gardens for the DuPont family, which have the great estates in Delaware and Pennsylvania. And Sylvia Saunders was in the middle of the peony garden, and they hadn't had her since the 60s. So we cut this one in half at the roots, and they have half of this one, and it will grow back. A little bit about the peony garden. You walk into this from the left, if you're coming in from the hospitals, and the arboretum is to the right. Each one of those beds is about 30 feet on a side, to give you a sense of scale. Each one holds 15 pairs of peonies. What Dr. Upjohn set out was the longest term twin study in ornamental peonies that anybody's ever heard of, but he didn't express it that way. He said, you need to compare in order to understand excellence. And if you only look at one of something, you don't know if it was that one or if it's typical of it. This turns out to be foundational for what we're able to do with this garden. So what we decided to do, we started up a very quiet campaign about, we knew this was going to take funds, and my charge was make this relevant to a research university, specifically this research university, find other ways to think about it and keep it as a public pilgrimage site. Make sense? That's part of the fun, right? So we have, to be exact, 787 different kinds of peonies out there. A couple of the beds are cut off because of topography, so geometry rules, as I tell people, and they're in pairs. And we have some that we still don't know what they are, but we're confident of all the others. One of the original ideas is that they would never be labeled. Fraternity brothers move labels around just for their own amusement. Teenagers move them around. Believe it or not, blue jays and crows like to make nests with them. And so each one of these squares, again, is 30-some feet. So what we've decided to do is to do big ledger-size laminated sheets. You can also get these online on the QR code on the business card out there, and have themes about how to walk through the garden and see particular ones. So this one was called Famous Ladies. Because a lot of these were named for women, which we'll get into the whole gender role and sexism of men naming things for women. But this way you can see where to go, what they are about, and on the back side of the card is a little bit about that particular woman and why the person thought they were being honored. I've been amused to go through and hear students go, Mrs. Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was she? And it's just coincidence that Mr. Franklin bred Mrs. Franklin D. Roosevelt. But one of the things I like about this one is it's wonderfully fragrant. But then I had to admit, I had no idea who Fanny Crosby was. Why a breeder of peonies in Minnesota would name one for her. Does anyone here recognize the name? Fanny, I see a hand up. Go right ahead.
She was a musician.
The Alumni Association, where someone finally knows. She wrote hymns and gospel songs, and about 10% of the Methodist hymnals still will say F. Crosby on the bottom. I'm not a Methodist, but I've had people who are Methodists tell me that that is still true. She was blinded in childhood, but she believed in singing the Spirit. And so the breeder felt that this sang the Spirit. But what about peonies by women versus peonies named for women? When we first started this, and then a few years in, we went through and we analyzed, just as you would a library collection or an art collection. And we wanted to know the years, the breeders, and then working with a retired Dr. Dickerson, she figured out the gender of the breeders based on first name into 3 categories: clearly male, clearly female, couldn't tell. And we removed the couldn't tells, which were about 15% of them. And out of them, it came out that out of all of our peonies, and this is how weighted it is by how many of our plants are these different peonies, only 2 of them were by women. Which brings up the question, was that typical of the nursery trade at the time? That is, do we have a true sample of what was out there, or was Dr. Upjohn skewed in terms of how he was viewing beauty? And of these, they're minor ones, freeborn and please. It says 0% because in the pie chart you have to have 3 to get to 1%, and we have 2 of please and 3 of freeborn. So that's why the 0%, but they really are there. So what Dr. Dickerman also did was she went through thousands of peony registries looking for the breeders, and then how many peonies did they introduce? And it turns out ours, we only have numbers 1 and 2. It turns out that it's very skewed. We have a very male breeder oriented collection, which comes up into whose sense of beauty and what was missing, what is still missing from our collection. When Please introduced Jubilee, and we have the original Jubilee in the garden, and it's still a beautiful plant, the New York Times carried it. But they make more of the fact that she's 90 than the fact that she's a recognized national peony breeder. And it took me forever to even find a picture of her because she was considered working class. She worked in a wholesale nursery most of her life, and she bred peonies once she retired down in Ohio. I don't know if this is her garden or somebody else's, but there she is. And Dr. Upjohn thought enough about her, he found her at her church retirement community in California to interview her about what she was doing because he felt her peonies exemplified excellence. Of the 71 men of the same time period, I think we have all of 1 through 10 and then a scattering all the way out. So in other words, Dr. Upjohn had a look he was going for, and that look was mostly being provided by men. I bring this up because peonies were bred as cut flowers. They were not bred as garden flowers. They were for ceremonial events. And now we're getting into the gendered spaces of early 20th century and late 19th century America of who had control over the aesthetics and the politics of, say, church arrangements, civic halls. These were one of the most important plants for Memorial Day up until the 1960s. Who's arranging, who's deciding it? Because the interior spaces were often by women, but it's appears that we have one of the main connoisseurs, a man being very skewed with the gift that he gave to the University of Michigan. So one of our objectives is to try to find some of the ones by women so that we can introduce them. I see a hand up.
It seems that for a long time, women were doing things and creating things, but they were not getting credit for them. So it's quite possible that a lot of those were indeed developed by women, but their names are not.
That we think is also the case. And the question is how to deduce which ones were being marketed under the guy's name, but not acknowledging the woman or women who had been doing the reading. Agreed. In this case, Mr. Otten out of Illinois, most of his breeding he let be done by bees. That is, let Mother Nature take care of it. He had his own selection of what he wanted the parent plants to be. He did some of his own breeding, but it shows in the genomic work that we're doing that there was a lot of activity going on. But I have him here because this is his favorite picture, and the fact that in the 1950s, someone had a color photograph of himself taken in Illinois tells you that he's really, really proud. When I first came here, I was told these were all old peonies and they were mostly French. Well, in the pie chart, you can, each wedge is a quarter century. You can see that what we really have is early 20th century. And if we were to go to country, you'll find out that it's mostly American. Well, one of the things that comes up with that, like a library or art collection, is what do we want to collect? Is this just a Dr. Upjohn's gift? Or as we work through this, where do we want it to go as an intellectual and aesthetic tool? We decided that what we mostly want is North American breeders. And this is a map of where all the breeders are. And look at how Michigan is kind of the donut hole with breeders all around. Does that make any sense? Well, talking with one of the, actually a graduate student in economics here, he said, what do you bet that it has something to do with trade routes? And I gave a crazy look to this student, and he says, well, in the 20s, and you're moving peonies by bud, you'd have to have it refrigerated. So that would have been boxcars with ice. And he says, what do you bet this ties to citrus trade? And it's going to tie with railroads, and you're going to have your breeders near. This is why you have creative students. And this is the sort of thing that would be really good to follow up of how did American horticulture orient around railroad lines? Because Michigan is not a place for transcontinental railroads. In building this peony garden, and now that we knew there were several ways we could tie different themes into the university, we were going, well, has anybody ever tried to endow a peony garden before or to build a peony garden? And it turns out at least 7 universities had peony gardens early in the 20th century. Cornell had the largest with over 500 peonies, almost a third again larger than ours. Not one of those plants remains. Nobody knows what happened to the garden other than it's under a building now. Swarthmore College had one of the most important collections by Mr. Scott of Scott Paper Company. He was a Swarthmore alum and trustee. The major peony garden is gone under a peony garden, again without a trace. This happens at University of Illinois, the University of Alberta. You go over and over again and they disappear. What happened? So we thought if we're going to put a campaign together, we'd better know why the early other ones failed. And it turns out that the pattern that you come up with, and we're also going to build a network of gardens so we can share, because like with books, you like to know who else has a copy of it, because that way, if you lose it, you can get it back, like that Sylvia Saunders. Or if everybody's got a copy, let's not everybody have a copy, and this is where we could get rid of some of the ones that are legacy ones for us. But if they're common, let's get something that is by women or of an era that has another theme to show. Well, it turned out the reason that most of those failed is because they were the passion of one faculty member. And although dissertations may have been done and publications were done when he, and it was always a he, when he retired, there was no interest in it because it wasn't seen as a tool. And although the public liked it, the university wanted to be done with it. One of the things we also have out there are unknown peonies. Well, you know they had a name at the beginning, that just that the records weren't good enough over in the old days. So one of the things we've thought is, how do we re-identify them? Should we also just crowdsource, the way Dr. Upjohn did, some rankings of these, just to see what people like? But more importantly, how do we bring them out of records amnesia? And is this tool then something that we could use in other ways? This has led us into a whole series of research with the EEB lab here, and it's on peony genomics. That is, just like there's 23andMe, can we come up with something like that for peonies? Well, it turns out, and we're 8 years into this with Dr. Nastasia Lasava here from the Central Botanic Gardens, Minsk. She's actually here with the green card at U of M over in the EEB labs, doing great research there, but she also works on peonies. It turns out that if you're going to do this and going to make this peony garden a living scientific reference collection, you are into the biggest data management array you can imagine. And we worked with the School of Information faculty because now every record coming out of it and every genome has to tie to the plant. All the pictures have to tie to the plant, and it can't just be by name. So this is just an example of the information flow that has to go in the databases behind it. Intriguingly, most of the persons working here, including the SI faculty, have all been women. So one of the things we worked on were molecular markers. We did a trial set, and this is some of our work, and we can begin to see breeders are clustering. The logic of it is we'd like to start seeing if we get lots and lots of breeders from, including lots of their cultivars from other gardens, we can start putting the unknowns into branches and go, oh, well, this then has to be by this breeder because it clusters with everything of this breeder. That's where we're trying to go with it. And with that, we're then trying to mash the whole thing together into making it geospatially available to you, because we have a website and we want it to be on the cell phone, so that this can also be a public face of science, a public face of informatics, and ultimately one about genderedness and beauty. So taking a step back, what we're really trying to do is give a social and evolutionary history of peonies and how they interact with culture. Peonies and beauty have always been important in terms of people finding peace and people finding respite. Being next to the hospitals, it is no exception here. The number of hospital staff, sometimes patients, family members coming to the peony garden is phenomenal. There is an entire whole unexplored area about beauty, mental health, and spiritual health that's likely can be worked on here or investigated here. One of the things we wanted to add to here were the tree peonies, which are shrubs. They're not actually trees. So we had to build new beds of them. Tree peonies were known in Europe, as were herbaceous peonies, which are native. And I bring this one up of that herbaceous peonies were so important in European culture that this one, it's a study detail of an altarpiece. And that is this line drawing, this painting, 1472.
Wow.
That's before Columbus started colonizing the Americas. Do you think of something that scientifically precise being drawn anywhere in Western art is actually, to our knowledge, the first scientific depiction of a plant. This is far more typical of that time period. This is tree peonies. Clearly people were getting stories of tree peonies coming out of Japan, and it didn't make any sense to them. And by the way, cotton in German is tree wool. So this is trying to explain tree wool. Obviously the lambs are being sprung out by trees. This whole kind of fantasy botany is more typical of the era than that depiction. But there was a tree peony mania. It swept Europe and it swept Eastern North America. The tree peonies don't divide easily. And part of the appeal of herbaceous peonies is you can cut the roots in half and the elite will buy new peonies. And then the workers and others get the older ones and you can just take little pieces and take them away with you. What we also have in this garden, and they're all modern, are hybrids between the tree peonies and the herbaceous peonies. And these have been wanted for over 1,000 years. They're very difficult to do. It was only figured out in the 1940s by a Japanese botanist named Mr. Ito. He bred over 5,000 plants and only 4 of the seeds ever germinated. And he died before he could see them. Aren't these wonderful colors? So we have a whole bed of these coming on to help people understand peonies. I'm co-author of 2 peony books. And then just here at U of M, these are all the collaborators already. And we can now add the School of Music, because one of the things being worked on is pieces about having people engage with flowers in public as interactors. So you'll see a variety of things there. I have a couple personal peony favorites I just want to run through, then we'll look at some bonsai and wrap up. This is Chocolate Soldier by a guy named Auden. Isn't that name problematic? The original Chocolate Soldier is an operetta out of Austria in the 1850s, and it's about the soldier who melts like a chocolate bar. It gets brought into this country, and you can find it used even by Tuskegee talking about African-American soldiers in World War I. You can find it in a disparaging racist context of white Americans about African-American soldiers. The record covers at the Library of Congress are appalling in terms of racial stereotypes. There was also then a Black drama group in Philadelphia that put on the Chocolate Soldier operetta in whiteface. There's an entire element here about just the naming of plants. This is one of my favorites. We have it here. She's one of the last to blooms, and she's perfect other than there's no fragrance. Doesn't it look like it ought to just be wonderfully fragrant? None. Aren't these interesting centers? I call these fried eggs, because to me they look like a fried egg flower. But it's the middle of that center apparently only evolved once in Japan under horticultural conditions in the 1400s, and everything like it is descended from it. And this is a contemporary one, and if I had been naming this, it wouldn't be Dutel. And you have to understand that Auden at times had a Southern American version of English, and you have to slur, kind of call this Dutel, you know, about it's gossip time. Because that's how it would have been said in North Carolina where I went to college. But I would have called this one the Pentecost, because doesn't it look like speaking in flames and speaking in tongues? And Auden was very religious. One of the peonies out there on the table that I brought from my own garden is red charm. Reds are highly desired in peonies. And to wrap up this part, and I have a very small part about bonsai, is it took us 15 years to put the campaign together. There was a $2 million naming gift. It came in a series of phases. And the reason the family was interested is, one, it makes a civic space. And 2, we're looking at ways to engage students and faculty for thinking. And a quarter of the endowment is a research endowment. And I just want to show you there, and there are over 50 others as well. So that's part of the framing there, but I had this element about Go Bloom. Can we do this again in a different context? I have very few pictures, and it's about bonsai. Bonsai is a verb. Just like to dance is a verb. And a dancer in a pose is not a dance. These trees live centuries when they're well cared for, and they never look the same. Bonsai is the slowest of performing arts, and I think it's one of the most dramatic. And yes, we really did get one in the football stadium. The U of M has been gifted in a series of years, we're about halfway through it, one of the most important bonsai collections outside of Japan. It's clearly going to be one of the 5 most important in the Americas. As with bonsai, as with peonies, we're using horticultural finesse to explore something else. What bonsai are really about is our relationship with nature, our relationship with something else living. All the bonsai artists I've worked with and have been around many for years is the bonsai trains you. You do not train the bonsai. There's a look you may be wanting to go through, and in both the pine tree and the azalea, these are all roots that are exposed, and you can only do about another 1/4 inch a year. And if this is the dance that's being done, this is a legacy that you're projecting to the future of how someone will work with this. These plants have to be watered daily, sometimes several times a day, which means they've gone through every political upheaval. When you see old collections from China and Japan, doesn't matter what was happening for wars and famine, somebody was misting these. Aren't they stunning? We're very interested in this collection, and it's part of why we onboarded it, because you can think of bonsai as one of the great art forms of the world, like ballet, which started in late medieval Europe, and for which I would say the Harlem Dance Theater is probably the best ballet corps in the world right now, though the Russians would disagree. And if you had taken the dance group out of Harlem and put them in the Italian courts, I think they would have screamed with the idea that was ballet. Bonsai starts in India. It moves across cultures. It came to this country predominantly at the end of World War II, which is why we think of it as being Japanese. Much like other kinds of music and performance, its cultural roots are deep. Japanese Americans were imprisoned during World War II, prohibited from owning land, and when you go through the photographs, you can find bonsai. It was that important. These plants have meaning. We tend to trivialize them at times, but when we're looking at what gardens can do to move people forward, to make them think, to make us enjoy each other and appreciate the resources we have, beauty is so important. But let's dive deeper. Thank you. Alrighty, I know things are late, but we're going to keep on rolling, and I know I'm now between you and lunch.
Those tickles in your throat always come at the worst times, don't they? Those tickles in your throat always come at the worst times, don't they?
Okay, the 3 of us together, eh?
There's a special presentation from Jocelyn Bennett, who is part of the programming committee.
I know you love peonies.
Yeah.
It's a peony plant from us.
Hold on, wait.
Okay, I gotta get down to everyone's height.
Okay, now I have to go to Park right now.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
thank you so much. Yes.
I just want to thank Dave Michener for a very interesting talk. I think we all enjoyed it very much. We've got 1 or 2 other announcements before we have lunch. Please feel free to stay after lunch, particularly if you're members, because we have a business meeting. Everyone is welcome to stay, and there will also be tours of the Alumni Center following the business meeting. Sharice?
Thank you, Betty. At this time, we'll ask Marilyn Lagoon to come forward, please. She has a thank you letter that she will read. It's from the editor of the Michigan Daily. This young lady just graduated and she has spoken to us in the past.
Thank you for letting me share this. This is from Julia Verklin, who was an editor at the Michigan Daily. And she sent this to me. When I joined the Daily as a freshman, I was told that receiving fan mail in response to your articles was a sign that you made it. And now graduating, I know this to be true. Over 2 years ago, I wrote a piece about my favorite study spots on campus. A space with a rich history that so few people know about. I wanted to shed light on the stories of the alumni, U of M alumni, who campaigned tirelessly for buildings and opportunities that we have come to take for granted. In that process, I learned so much more. I found you, the council, and a new purpose. Words cannot express my gratitude for your kindness towards me and your clear, unwavering commitment to bettering the lives of Michigan women everywhere. Your story and connection to campus will carry with me as I leave Ann Arbor, for there is more work to be done. It's my hope that when I am your age, scholarship, access, gathering spaces, athletic feats, and more will too be written about triumphantly. Always, Julia. Now, what she did is wrote an article that she wants to be read in 21-24. So I'm going to get it printed and have it in the archives of the group so that if anyone makes it 21-24. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn, for sharing that. That was absolutely wonderful. And let's give Marilyn another round of applause. Her birthday is Wednesday. Now at this time, we'll have closing remarks from our lovely chair, Ms. Betty Bishop.
I think I can speak loudly enough to speak from here, just to say, please enjoy your lunch. We will reconvene shortly after 1 for the business meeting.